Alrighty, good morning, health champions. Happy Friday. Can't believe we're already at the end of another week here. It's hard to believe how quickly the month of February has gone by. March starts next week, right? And that's just crazy to me that we're already starting the third month of 2022. Hopefully, you guys had a good week this week. I had a good one. It's been a busy week. I've gotten a lot done and worked a couple of long days the past couple of days, so trying to get a little bit caught up today. But excited to have our 30-minute or so session about our live training for today. I know today's topic is we're going to be talking about dairy products and just why they're so important. A lot of people, and this is a big thing, a lot of people don't get enough dairy in their diet. And we're going to talk about why that's the case and how to hopefully correct that. But first, we need to understand what counts as a dairy product, right? Um, so these are many different things. Obviously, most people think of milk, cheese, yogurt. Obviously, those are huge food products as far as when it comes to dairy. But there's other things as well that also get into this category are cream cheese, sour cream, cream like that you'd pour in your coffee, and then obviously butter. Butter falls into this because butter is made from dairy, and so this is where you have to think through because obviously certain dairy products are better for you than others. Obviously, milk's probably better for you than butter, right? I mean, that's a big, big concept there. And so the key thing is where are the nutrients in the dairy product that you're consuming, and that's why it's so important to understand the nutrients and then which ones have more nutrients and which therefore they are better for you. So dairy products, a lot of people, why is it so important to have them in your diet? And they are essential because they provide a bunch of different nutrients, and our body needs especially some of these in order to function properly, such as calcium, phosphorus, vitamin A, vitamin D, which many dairy products nowadays are fortified with vitamin D, so this is especially important because vitamin D and phosphorus and calcium all interact in our body. Riboflavin, vitamin B12, protein, potassium, zinc, choline, magnesium, and selenium. So in dairy products, there's all these awesome nutrients that our body needs. And when we don't take in enough dairy products, therefore we're not getting them. Um, so big thing here is one that a lot of people are aware of is calcium. And dairy products are the number one source of calcium in our diets nowadays. And the reason why calcium is so important, along with vitamin D, is because that it helps promote healthy bones. And a lot of people are aware of this. They're just not aware of the fact that a good portion of us don't get enough of a recommended amount of dairy products in our daily diet. Therefore, we have a tendency to be deficient in calcium. And that makes us at risk for having certain issues, especially as we age, because as we age, our bones start to deteriorate. And that's a normal part of the aging process. But the more calcium you have in your diet, the less likely you are to lose the bone material that gives your bones the strength and structure that they need. Versus if you don't have enough calcium, you're more at risk for things like osteoporosis. And obviously, when you have osteoporosis, you're at risk for having issues where you can have, if you fall or get injured, you're more likely to have a broken bone. And obviously, that's not a good thing, especially when you're older, because the healing process that takes is a much longer process. Your bones just don't heal as quickly or heal as necessarily as well sometimes due to the aging process. Your bones aren't designed to layer up new bone tissue when we're aging. It will. It just isn't a quick process as versus a child breaks their bones are growing and changing continuously because obviously they're growing, and this helps them to obviously not only get taller but in all of that, but if they break something, their bodies are much quicker to repair it. That's why having proper levels of calcium And vitamin D, as you're growing for kids and adolescents, is so important because this is helping them to build healthy bones. And then as an adult, it's important to continue that process of taking in enough calcium and vitamin D, usually obviously through dairy products, that you're actually able to maintain those healthy bones and your teeth. Your teeth are, we don't often think of our teeth as part of our skeletal system, but they are. And so you need to have good intake of dairy products in order to be able to have strong, healthy teeth. So, excuse me. Obviously, and a big part of this is phosphorus, because phosphorus plays a role in this whole process. And many people don't think of, phosphorus when we're talking about bones. They think of calcium. They know that vitamin D plays a role. They just don't realize exactly how important phosphorus is to this process. And with dairy products, the nice thing is, especially now that they fortify dairy products usually with vitamin D, because otherwise we have to get it through usually sunlight exposure, which is the number one source of vitamin D. But with having products that are fortified, this way you're getting it all in one, and that's going to help your body process it better. Other big thing with dairy products that a lot of people don't realize is potassium. Um, and the reason why potassium is so important is because it helps your body with your heart function and helping maintain a good blood pressure. So with dairy products, they have potassium in them, not as much maybe necessarily as, like a banana or other products that are very high in potassium. But by having, milk or something, you're still getting enough potassium that it's providing benefit to your body. Our bodies need potassium. That's one of the main chemicals our heart functions on. And if you don't have enough potassium, it can cause your heart to be irregular as far as its beats and other things. So potassium is a key role here. Dairy is a great way to get potassium. And so as you can tell, dairy products are really important to getting the nutrients our body needs in order to be able to function in a healthy, constructive way. Um, and so obviously there's different types of dairy products. As I mentioned before, when we're talking about, butter doesn't have as much calcium as milk, and it's got a higher fat content. So while butter tastes great, and we like to put butter on all sorts of different things, whether it's toast or you're putting it over popcorn, that's not as healthy for you as, drinking a glass of milk. So this is where trying to understand, where are you getting your dairy from? You have to look at the nutrient breakdown of each individual product. And then big thing that a lot of people have questions when it comes to dairy, you have the normal or full fat versions, low fat, fat free. Which ones should you be consuming? Most people have a tendency to think, well, low fat or fat free would be better because of the whole idea that we have villainized fat in our society as as being bad. And that's not to say that this concept isn't true or that it's false. This really started back in the 70s and 80s when the idea of saturated fats was thought to cause significant harm to our health. Um, and this is where the dietary guidelines for Americans back in the 80s started recommending that people consume non or low fat dairy products in place of full fat versions, with the exception for like young children because their body needs fat. And so the whole idea was for, good 20, 30 years, that was the message that was put out there that many of us got and still follow to this day. While, um, and even in 2010, there were the legislation put in for schools to replace full fat versions with non or low fat unflavored milk, or even flavored milk like chocolate milk. And so the point was for not little kids, but older children and teenagers, was as we're seeing increases in obesity. The thought was by replacing full fat versions of dairy products with either non or low fat, we're helping cut out some of the fat in the diet that they're consuming. Because obviously, 5 days a week, most kids are having at least lunch at school. Some may even have breakfast at school. And if they're having a dairy product, then they're going to have to, let's try to cut some of the fat out of that. Um, However, some things, as more research came to light in the early 2000s, there were some surprising results, and that full-fat dairy products could be just as healthful as their low-fat counterparts. And this is where it really got into the concept of not all dairy products, whether they're full fat or low fat, are the same. And that's, we can't lump them all into, okay, all low fat dairy products are better than full fat and non fat's better than both of those. And that's where it really got into the whole concept of how is the dairy product processed? Therefore, what is the nutrition content of that end result product? You know, when we're thinking through like cheese or yogurt, there's a fermentation process. And that whole process helps improve the digestibility of, you know, certain elements within those products. And they you know, have a lower lactose content. Lactose obviously is the sugar that's in milk. So it's important to understand that when we're looking at products, we can't just go based off the whole idea that, you know, we've always gone off from, which is that, oh, if it's dairy products, it needs to be low fat or it needs to be fat free. You know, that's something that is a shift in how most of us were brought up, how most of us think of dairy products. You know, and the other big concept here is, what are you getting your dairy product with? Obviously, if we're getting dairy in the form of cheese, you know, this is just one example. And I sort of alluded to it with butter a little bit ago, but with this example with the cheese, is it, you know, are you having a slice of cheese and you're just snacking on a piece of cheese? Or is the cheese on top of a awesome grilled burger, or on top of pizza, you know, and that comes with a whole slew of other things like saturated fat and all of that, you know. Or are you, you know, going to have a piece of cheese or like cut up cube cheese with fruit as your dessert, and that is your dessert instead of, you know, a high sugared cake. Um, and that's, you know, part of it is understanding, what are you consuming your dairy products with? What are those dairy products comprised of? And then the other idea is, you know, the frequency and amount you're consuming. For instance, if you are drinking milk and you're consuming full fat milk versus low fat milk, the idea is, how much are you taking in? I mean, full fat, when we consume products with fat, it helps our body to feel fuller, usually a little bit longer, especially when it's paired with, you know, a good source of protein and some form of a good carbohydrate. That mix, you know, is important because it gives you that sense of fullness. And when we have that for a longer duration, you know, we're likely to consume less overall. And that's something that is key. Versus, and this is where if you have a low-fat milk and you're drinking several glasses of that throughout the day, you're going to not feel as full because obviously there's less fat in that. Therefore, you feel like it's okay to consume more of them throughout the day. However, when you start to add all those together, you might take in more saturated fat than if you had just had one glass of regular whole milk. And that's where, you know, you have to think through the whole diet you're taking in each day versus just one independent little component of it. I know for me personally, I can't drink whole milk, just it's too thick. So I usually go with a low fat version just because I like drinking that better. I like the texture of it. It's not as much, I don't feel like I'm choking on it as much. But I'm also aware of, you know, how many glasses of that am I having. If, you know, usually I still only have maybe a glass of milk with a snack or something. Because when I eat a meal, I'm drinking water with it. But I'm not, you know, downing multiple glasses of milk during a day that's low fat, you know, versus having a whole glass, a whole milk of a glass full. And that's, you know, something just to be aware of. It's like, dairy is very good for us. It's just, how are we taking it in? And, you know, the source, where is it coming from? And so that's something to be mindful of when we're, you know, planning our intake. And when then the next usual big question comes in is that, well, how much dairy should you be getting every day? Like, you know, what's the recommended amount? And obviously this is really dependent on several factors. Obviously your age, your gender, how tall you are, how much you weigh, your level of physical activity. For women, if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, obviously the amount you need to consume is much higher. Um, and so this is where it's very important to calculate, that as well. General recommendations, though, and that's what we're going to be talking about for most adults, whether from 19 to above 60, whether you're a man or a woman, it's 3 cups of, any form of dairy products throughout the day. Obviously, for girls 9 to 13, same thing for boys, it's also 3 cups. So you need to have a lot of dairy intake. For pregnant women, it's a little bit different. Your doctor will help you decide, depending on, your health condition and all that, how much you really need. But for most of us, on a general everyday basis, it's 3 cups. Um, so then that becomes the question, well, what equates to a cup? So for most people, 1 cup of milk, yogurt or soy milk, or 1.5 ounces of like natural cheese is considered to be a cup. And when we're talking cup, we're talking 8 ounces. So for milk, that was 8 ounces of milk, or an 8 ounce yogurt cup. That's 1 cup. Um, so it depends on what are you taking in, as far as are you taking in yogurt, how big is the yogurt cup. Usually for a lot of people, the harder one to calculates cheese, because obviously cheese isn't liquid, so we can't measure it in that way. So if we're talking about hard cheese, which is like cheddar, mozzarella, Swiss, Parmesan, 1.5 ounces, it is considered the equivalent of a cup. A third of a cup of any type of shredded cheese. 1 ounce of like processed cheese, like American cheese, like the sliced cheese that we normally put on sandwiches. Half a cup of regatta cheese. Obviously, regatta cheese is a little bit more form fitting, so you can sort of measure that a little better. 1.25 cups of cottage cheese. 2 ounces of queso fresco, and 2 slices of queso blanco. So when you're looking at cheese, obviously, because that's usually the hardest to figure out, that is, a little bit more of a process trying to calculate how much. Um, but just remember, most packages have a serving size on it. And if you eat that serving size, therefore you then can calculate out, different nutrition benefits and such. Um, so some people obviously don't like dairy products, or they can't consume dairy products. So you can get your necessary calcium intake from other sources. And so there are certain things like fortified soy milk or yogurt, and they also have, the calcium, the vitamin A, vitamin D, and all the other nutrients you need in them. So that way you're able to get that without having to have, the big issue usually is lactose, the milk sugar. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that in just a second here. But I wanted to cover other potential products you can consume, that are sold as milks, but they're plant-based versus coming from, obviously, a cow. Such as almond milk, rice milk, coconut milk, oat milk, and even hemp milk. Um, they all contain calcium, but aren't considered a part of the dairy group because their nutrition content is not similar to dairy milk or fortified soy milk. Soy milk is usually the most preferred alternative to traditional dairy milk, just because of the fact that it's most chemically similar to dairy milk, if you want to look at it in that way. Um, but other foods are fortified with calcium as well, such as calcium fortified juices like orange juice. Um, Canned fish also have certain high amounts of calcium, like sardines, salmon with bones if you eat salmon. Tofu that's got calcium added to it. Tahini, which is like a sesame seed butter or paste, is got high amounts of calcium. And certain leafy green vegetables like turnips, spinach, kale, bok choy, or even collard greens. Um, so as you can see, there's a lot of ways to be able to get calcium if you're not a huge dairy fan. Now, obviously, our bodies need calcium, so make sure you're getting some adequate amount of that in. But definitely, if you like dairy products, you have to get that in there. That's really important. Um, certain things that are fortified with calcium is important. You also have to make sure, though, that you have phosphorus and vitamin D because that helps your body to process the calcium. So this is where if you don't want to have dairy milk, make sure you're drinking something like with soy milk, because obviously that, or other soy products, or if you're going to be having some other form of milk, like almond milk or something like that. Obviously, not only look at the calcium content, but look at the vitamin D content and other things like that, so that way you're making sure you're getting the nutrients your body needs. And so I did want to touch briefly upon lactose and lactose intolerance. Many people understand the concept that it's, your body can't process something within milk, they can, or other dairy products. Therefore, the people who are lactose intolerant can't have any of those products. Lactose, as I mentioned before, is the natural occurring sugar that's in milk. And typically, for most people, your body will break down this sugar molecule and help digest it with an enzyme called lactase. And some people have low levels of lactase. This is what causes them to be, have issues processing lactose from dairy products. So that's where when they have low levels and their body's unable to process it, it causes a wide range of symptoms because the bacteria that's supposed to be in your stomach, in your abdomen, your gut, essentially, that's trying to digest the lactose, actually, it starts to ferment it, and that's where you have that causes all the symptoms, such as gas, bloating, diarrhea, or constipation. So that's why for individuals who are lactose intolerant, what that means is their body just can't process it that well. So there's many dairy products are high in lactose, such as milk, obviously, ice cream, and soft cheeses, like cottage cheese. Versus yogurt and aged cheeses usually are lower in lactose. So some individuals, depending on how much lactase their body can produce, can tolerate having like yogurt or other hard aged cheeses versus obviously they can't have milk, they can't have ice cream, they can't have the soft cheeses. Others, they aren't able to tolerate even yogurt or any of those just because of the fact that their body doesn't produce enough lactase, period. Um, there are commercial products available, Lactate pills, that if you consume them, they have the lactase enzyme in it. So for the individuals whose body's not producing enough, this helps them to break down the lactose. And you just have to take it before any meals that might contain dairy, so that way it's going to help reduce the uncomfortable symptoms that you're having to deal with. Other products that are great, Lactate, cow's milk, it contains the lactase enzyme. It's been added to it, so that way the product is very low in lactose. So if you drink it, you're supposed to be getting the benefits that come with, obviously drinking dairy, without having to go through all the uncomfortable side effects. So for those who are lactose intolerant, there are options out there if you want to be able to consume dairy products. Obviously, as we talked about, dairy is super essential to providing nutrients your body needs. And so I highly encourage you, there's plenty of options out there. Find something that you enjoy, or hopefully several things that you enjoy. And just be aware of where your dairy products are coming from, so that way you're getting the most nutrients out of it without the fat and other things that can come with it. And then just be aware of how much you're actually consuming throughout the day. Obviously, I know most people don't have enough in their diet, so consuming as much as possible is usually a good thing. Because to get to that 3 cup mark, it's not as hard as you think, but it can be if you're not paying attention to it. So hopefully this helped clear up some concepts as far as, why dairy is so important, where you can find it, how much you should be taking in. If you guys have any questions or comments about it, please put it below. Send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. If you guys have anything else you'd like to talk about, just let me know. I'd be happy to discuss anything health or wellness related. Otherwise, you guys have a great weekend, and I will see you next week. And until then, you guys stay healthy.